Okay, welcome to the final module, the Scholar module. We're going to get into some scholarship of teaching and learning. And we have here the designer, the lead designer behind the module to see behind the design and ask a few questions. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Jerry. Happy to be here.
This is great. We're approaching the end of the MOOC. It's been exciting. It's been fun.
Amazing, amazing. I'm really appreciate the folks who have persevered through all of the weeks of study, and I think it's amazing that people are able to sustain their interest and continue to pursue it. I think those badges might have something to do with it.
Yeah, I think people like those badges. It's very cool. So can you tell us a little bit about what you set out to do with the module?
Well, I think one of the key ideas associated with the Scholar module is that we really need to be about as diligent in examining our teaching practice as we might be in thinking about our discipline area and what we teach. I think we need to also look at how we teach and how that works for students, and in particular, the kinds of outcomes we hope to achieve and whether we can do that. So it's really more about scholarly teaching, thinking a little bit about your teaching rather than a giant research project on teaching. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the driving forces, was that we need to become reflective practitioners. And we get clues and cues all the time from students and through their performance or their interactions with us that things are working really well or maybe not so well. And it really kind of behooves us to take stock of those cues and begin to dig in a little more deeply about why is that the case and how could I make it better. That's
great. And can you give us a little insight into the process you went into designing the module?
Yeah, well, it was very self-reflective. I mean, I recalled a few years ago, I was working at Simon Fraser University, and a colleague asked me to teach this giant class of 300 students, a third of whom were engineers, a third of whom were computer scientists, and a third of whom were business students.
Oh, wow.
And the day I went in to observe, they were all sitting there with laptops, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a challenge, because how do I hold their interest? What do I do? How do I make this work? And so that's the example I cite in the module. I actually went to Google and Googled, like, how do I hold the attention of a class of 300 all equipped with technology for an hour? And there were some great suggestions around using the technology effectively in an interactive way to engage the class. And so that's what I did. I broke it into 3 parts and had the students do things individually and collaboratively, and then report it out to the whole class. And it took a lot of energy to do it. And I went away from that class thinking, wow, I was able to make this work once in a 13-week class. Could I sustain it over 13 weeks? And so it made me really think about how to deal with large-scale classes. And then while I was looking around at the university, I saw some great examples of flipped classroom models happening in the mathematics department at Simon Fraser. And that's one of the case studies we cite in the module, is that they really took it seriously because they realized that their first-year calculus students were really having a lot of trouble and were struggling. And they needed a really good reason to flip the classroom, and they wanted to study it actively as they were doing it. And they were very proactive in going out and seeking partnerships with colleagues on campus who worked in the Teaching and Learning Center to say, hey, I really want to take a deeper look at this. Could you help me design something? And they did. So that's cited as a case study in the module, but it maybe raises the bar a little too high for most folks who are just getting into this. And maybe it's better just to reflect, as I did, on how could I make my large-scale class more interactive, taking simple problems, or not so simple, but problems that truly affect you on a daily basis in your teaching, and trying them out with your class and see how they work. That's probably the starting point for a kind of scholarly teaching, self-reflection in the classroom. And that's what the module is about. And it's really about finding a toehold you can have to really get on that scholarly teaching ladder to figure out how you can do a better job and how you can make the results of your teaching more effective for your students.
So is that kind of the what you're, in your wildest hopes and dreams people get out of this is that toe hold?
Yeah, I think it's that toe hold. It's a kind of a climbing analogy. Like this is hard work, and it's not without risk. And you risk exposure, right? When you're on a ledge and you're climbing up. And so it's really important to really find a starting point that you're confident with, that'll work for you, that allows you to do some of this investigative practice on your own with your own materials in your own class. And then perhaps branch out into a little bigger risk, you know, a little more steep wall, a bit of an overhang, you know, all of those things that you might face when you're climbing. And I think it's a good metaphor because nobody scales the highest peak or the biggest granite wall without a lot of practice and a lot of experience and skill. So you have to start somewhere. And so start as a kind of an apprentice at this and work your way up. And so that's what the module is really about, to really challenge people to think about how they might do that, what are some great questions they might ask, and how they might go about doing some of this work. And one of the real cool tenets of scholarly teaching and scholarship of teaching and learning is having a critical friend, someone you can work with, someone you can discuss your issues with and help work through them and debrief them after you've done them. So you're not on your own, you're becoming part of a community. And that's part of the overall idea we have for the Extend program, and that is developing a really confident personal professional presence. And understanding your own scholarship is a good part of that process.
Very cool. I'm excited to see what people what questions people come up and what they pursue. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think our experience with this in previous cohorts is that this is a module that people often struggle with because they set too high a bar for themselves in terms of what the starting point will be. And so I think going back to that climbing analogy where you actually try out a few holds and a few moves is probably the best way forward, because ultimately you really do over time only work towards mastery in teaching. I mean, I think it's probably people have such an ideal for themselves that they will be the perfect teacher at some point, but there are always dynamics at play, students you didn't account for, knowledge or expertise that comes in from the side, technological disruption that comes from behind. All of these things end up changing the context and the environment, and you have to adjust. So getting your head around scholarly teaching from the beginning is a really good way to say, okay, I'm cool with this, and I'll optimize as much as possible, realizing that it's a journey.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the insight, and we look forward to seeing what people do in there. This is great.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to see what they find, what they do, and what challenges they undertake. So thanks for asking.
No problem. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Terry. Take care.
You too.